Good afternoon, everyone. I see that we are down to the diehards for the day, and thank you for those of you who have stayed the course and who will remain with us through our final panel. I think today we've heard a lot about Angola, the many opportunities that it holds for those who are seeking to do business, and it's especially relevant now with talk. There's been a lot of talk about the need for greater diversification of investors and of actors in what is relatively vibrant and growing economy, even in the face of some of the economic slowdown that we've seen lately. Certainly this is a good part of my portfolio of promoting trade and investment between Angola and the U.S. at the U.S.-Angola Chamber. But we're also focused on looking at promoting issues to ensure that the environment within which people are working is good, is conducive. We have the privilege of having a really good panel in this regard. Two of our panelists will be speaking about their actual experiences working on the ground in Angola, while the third will help us to understand what her institution feels should be strengthened or addressed as Angola seeks to continue to attract investors so as to grow and diversify. I'm going to present them out of order for purpose. Our first speaker will be Mr. Ted Giletti. Mr. Giletti is a director of the Banco Angolano de Investimentos, or BAE as we know it, a private Angolan bank, which is also one of the largest banks in Angola. He's also the director of Angola Capital Partners, which is a Delaware-registered private equity fund management company. Mr. Giletti also serves as a member of the investment committee for the Fundo de Investimento Angolano Privado, FIPA. It is a Luxembourg-based private equity fund. He has over 30 years of banking experience involving primarily structured finance products with Bankers Trust Company in the FSU, Africa, Middle East, Eastern Europe, and subsequently with Union Bank of Switzerland, the UBS Warburg, Dillon Reed, and Standard Chartered Bank. He began his career with the Federal Reserve Bank of New York as an economist, and after that he served as a non-executive director of Equator Exploration Ltd., an AIM-listed independent oil company with involvement in West Africa. Ted also presently serves as the treasurer for the U.S.-Angola Chamber of Commerce. Our second panelist will be Mr. Victor Camilo. Mr. Camilo is the CEO of Tech Angola. Tech Angola is an Angolan company with 7 years of experience in IT services for the public sector and in business development within the arenas of oil and gas, aeronautical services, defense and security, agribusiness, transport, energy, and financial services. He hails from Uís province in the north of Angola, and he studied Portuguese at the military college and has a degree in electrotechnical engineering from the Lisbon Engineering High Institute. His career was built in IT and logistics as a consultant and manager working with global companies such as Siemens, CSC, and KPMG for over 25 years. He is committed to Angolan development and passionate about new challenges, and Mr. Camilo has been a speaker in various seminars and events dedicated to Angolan economic development. I purposely presented them first because they will speak on experiences, achievements, challenges, and opportunities that they see in Angola. And I would ask them also, as they give their remarks, to focus on recommendations that both the U.S. and the Angolan governments might be able to do to both facilitate as well as to expand private sector engagement in Angola. The second speaker, although I am presenting her third, is Valentina Saltane. Ms. Saltane has been a member, she's with the World Bank and specifically with the Doing Business unit of the World Bank. She's been a member of this Doing Business team since March 2011. She currently leads the Starting Business Indicator. For the first 2 years with this team, she was in charge of the Resolving Insolvency Indicator. Prior to that, Ms. Saltana was part of the Financial Access team at the World Bank, where she worked on financial access reports. Before joining the World Bank, she was a research analyst at the Law and Economic Consulting Group. She has worked with the World Resources Institute as a program coordinator. She has an MPA from Cornell University and a BA from Colby College. She's lived in numerous countries around the world. With that, let me first ask then for Mr. Giletti to begin with giving us his perspective on doing business in Angola, a place that he's been involved in for many years.
Janine, thank you very much, and greetings to all of you this afternoon. First thing before the clock starts, I just wanted to make mention that I don't know why there's all this palavra about getting visas, because, I mean, quite frankly, I find that I can get a visa from the embassy without any problem whatsoever, very quickly, usually within 24 to 48 hours. And it surprises me that there's so many criticisms of that whole process. That's just my own personal anecdotal information anyway. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to speak this afternoon. I'm really honored to be here. I don't really want to speak about the recent articles which have appeared in Foreign Policy magazine, the New York Times, the media coverage on PBS, and the articles which have appeared also in Wall Street Journal about Angola. But let me leave it to say that they cloud the thinking of people considering doing business in Angola. They influence the way people who are involved in policy making think about Angola. And unfortunately, the rest of us suffer the consequences. We're all familiar also with the issues of financial exclusion and de-risking, which have been talked about and referred quite a lot in magazines such as The Economist. And likewise, that too has had a very severe impact on us, particularly in the financial sector. And then Valentina is probably going to speak about this, but then you have the World Bank Index of Difficulty of Doing Business globally. And as we've already heard, Angola sits very close to the bottom. But however, I'm going to give you some indication which can tell you that you actually can do business and you can do it successfully. You just have to be smart, and I think we heard that in the last panel. You have to do your homework. You've got to be really focused and determined and committed and connect with the right people, smart people, people who really understand business. I want to talk about our bank, BAI, Banco Angolano de Investimentos, which was established as the first privately owned bank in 1996 with $32 million in capital. Today, that bank is more or less the first or second largest bank in the country, depending on which metric you want to look at, whether it's total assets, loans, capital, etc. But today, total shareholder funds are over $1 billion. We have about 600,000 active clients. That means just clients who are not just sitting on the books just as name only, but actually active. We have more than 2,000 employees, and we have about 130 branches throughout the country. The bank is about 75–80% focused on the corporate market and the balance in the retail sector. Now, I also want to talk about an investment fund that we, together with the Norwegian group Norfund, have set up. We're now in year 6, having gone through the first 5 years of investment cycle, and that's called Fundo de Investimento Privado Angola, FIPA. It's a Luxembourg-established investment fund focusing on private equity. That means it's not doing startups, it's investing in existing companies who want to expand their business or management buyouts. Initially, when we raised the fund, which was back about 6 years ago, at the height of the financial crisis internationally, we had a very difficult time because everything that was wrong, could be wrong, was wrong. First off, it was Angola, it was a frontier market. We had a team that had no previous experience. There were questions about the legal and enabling environment in the country, et cetera, including the fact that no one had ever done it before. This is a great reason, not to consider investing in a fund. No one had ever done it before. So we were the first. We started off. We raised $39 million from limited partners, and we raised $30 million in co-investment funds. And we invested across the economy in a number of different areas: waste treatment in the oil and gas sector, agriculture, fishing, building materials, and digital and print media and advertising. The results speak to themselves. All the companies are audited by an international auditing firm. We're subject to the financial authorities in Luxembourg. Everything is completely transparent. And the results so far are with an IRR, net of expenses north of 30%. We're now exiting 3 companies. We're talking to a listed company in France, a listed company in the United States, a listed company in Brazil, and we also have a put option back from one of the companies to a listed company in South Africa. So you can see we're quite serious. We're now in a stage of raising investment funds for fund number 2, and we've already gotten to a level of about $62 million. We hope to have our first close early in the new year, and we'd like to go on by the end of next year to raise close to $100 million if we can. We think this is the kind of investment fund and an investment vehicle that makes a lot of sense, not only to the current investors who are in it, like European Investment Bank, Norfund, a Spanish government, the Danish government through their Industrialization Fund for Development, and then we also have one other local bank in Angola. But to me, it also seems the perfect kind of a vehicle that somebody like the IFC should be considering as well, because it fits neatly into the agenda, the business objectives of an institution like IFC. The companies in which we invested, their total revenue that they turn over each year at current levels is about the equivalent of about $200 million. They employ about 1,700 people. And very importantly, to my friends here from the government, they also pay taxes to the government, circa $13 million back to the Treasury. So you can see we're benefiting the government. We're also investing in areas which make a lot of sense because they are aligned, particularly like fishing and agriculture, with the objectives of the government policies. Let me talk very briefly. Probably got about 2 minutes, right? Okay.
Max.
What's happening in the financial sector is that if you look at the challenges that we've faced, you have a very low bankerization rate, meaning that very few people have bank accounts. So you have a large subsistence and cash economy. There's been a rapid development of banks in the market. About 25 banks are operating right now. Tremendous crush for demand of human resources. So it really has put the strain on trying to develop adequate resources for people from the labor market. There have been very positive developments because of the oversight from the supervisory side with the central bank, particularly with its visos, which it enacted in 2013, focusing on internal controls, corporate governance, having proper external auditors, code of conduct, code of ethics, issues of conflicts of interest, and so on. And we already heard today about the FATCA being signed with the USA. Our bank also is involved in that process as well. And I'm also happy to say, too, that we are implementing a conversion to IFRS accounting principles by 2017, and that's something actually that even U.S. banks don't adhere to. Where do we go? What needs to be fixed? I think there has to be a much more engaged approach with international groups. The U.S. government should be more involved in providing technical assistance and consultants, particularly in the Ministry of Finance and the central bank. And we would urge that the government push ahead with the development of the stock exchange, the Bolsa de Valor, for trading of equity securities, because this will also provide us with our investment fund for exit opportunities for the companies in which we've invested. Those companies all have a track record of having audited accounts. They are ready to go in terms of bringing IPOs of companies to the market. And as I said, BNA, with its focus on bank supervision, has to intensify its efforts. It's crucial for us in the financial sector. And we think also that the telecom sector has to be opened up to allow more competition and development of the opportunities which are available globally. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Altana.
Can we get my slides on the...
Can we have her presentation, please? Mm-hmm. On the Doing Business Index?
Thank you.
Oh.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you very much. Special thanks to the Wilson Center and to Mondi for organizing such an important event. It's a great pleasure to be here today and to share some of our data on Angola as well as more broadly on the region. Before we start, let me just tell you very briefly what the Doing Business is about. Because when we look at our data, it's important to understand that we don't talk about big foreign businesses, multinational companies. The essence of the Doing Business project is mainly on small to medium-sized, domestically owned enterprises. So basically, these are the bottom companies that drive economy in many countries and that are very important in terms of providing jobs and also generating the revenue for the government. So this is what the Doing Business is about. Doing Business measures business regulations in 189 economies around the world. We focus on the life cycle of a small to medium-sized enterprise that is domestically owned. For each country, we consider the largest business city, and in the case of Angola, it's Luanda. And in 11 countries where the population is larger than 100 million inhabitants, we consider the second largest city. For example, in Kenya, we'll look at Kano. In Nigeria, we'll look at Kano as the second largest city. We only focus on the formal sector, so we don't look at the shadow economy, we don't look at informality. All the regulations and laws that we consider are the official data. We don't look at the informality. Also, because other institutions collect macro-level data or data on transparency, corruption. We don't touch upon those aspects. So we don't measure macroeconomic stability. We don't measure regulations that affect environment. We don't measure the strengths of the financial system. Our goal is only to look at bureaucratic processes and laws that affect SMEs. Here, just to show you the main indicators that the Doing Business considers. It starts with the company incorporation. So when a local person, a local citizen wants to start a business, what are the steps that need to be taken? How much it costs? What's the paid-in minimum capital that needs to be put in place? Then we also look at labor market regulations. And then once we assume the business is set up, something needs to be built, let's say a two-story warehouse, which is our standardized case study. We look again at processes that need to be complied with to obtain a building permit. Once that is done, electricity needs to be connected. So again, we look at the steps that are required to connect to electricity. We look at property transfers from one company to the other company. Again, what are the steps? What are the costs? What are the bureaucratic hurdles that are faced by entrepreneurs? We looked at getting credit and protecting minority shareholders, minority investors. During the life cycle of the company, we look at the tax regimes and how many taxes need to be paid, what is the tax threshold. And finally, from the legal standpoint, when things go wrong, when there are bankruptcies, either liquidation or reorganization proceedings that need to be undertaken, what are those and how efficiently those are carried out by the legal institutions. And also we look at contract enforcement between different parties. So this is basically the essence of Doing Business, what we measure. We introduced some methodological changes. Before, Doing Business was mostly looking at the efficiency of bureaucratic processes, but now we also look at quality of the regulations that govern those processes. For example, if it's in some countries it's very quick and easy to build a warehouse, but then if the warehouse collapses because proper inspections were not put in place, that actually is a drawback. So that's why for many of the indicators, I will not go into details on those, but we added the measures of quality as well as efficiency. The trade indicator was completely changed this year. For for Angola, we look at trade with China, and we look at exporting of steel and iron from Angola to China, and for imports, we'll look at imports of auto parts from China into Angola. So this is the change that we did this year to reflect better the situation on the ground for most of the economies. Okay, now let me talk specifically about Angola and Angola's performance on the doing business indicators. We designed a special measure that's called the frontier of the best practice. So when a country scores 100 points, it means it reached the best practice in the world on all of the indicators. If we look at the Angola's performance, currently it ranks 181 out of 189 economies around the world. And even though we are noticing that there are reforms on the ground that are picking up, we still believe that there is a way to go for Angola to advance in the future, because this is the country that has potential, that has the means to improve the business climate for the small and medium enterprises on the ground. So we hope in the future the trend will continue upward, and I'll talk in a second about the reforms that Angola implemented over the past year. So the front runners for the sub-Saharan Africa are Mauritius, Rwanda, Botswana, and these countries, the countries that are ranked on the top, they've been reforming actively over time, continuously over the past 10 years. So doing business, what we do, we put out the data for governments to use, and it's up to governments whether to use our data or not. But what we notice, a lot of countries, and Kazakhstan could be a good example, they were saying, well, we are a rich economy, actually our businesses are doing great. But when they started working with us more closely, they realized that the big businesses are doing great, but actually SMEs are facing a lot of hurdles on the ground. The processes are not clear, institutions are not working well for them, they're not catered towards SMEs. And Kazakhstan actually this year is one of our top improvers and top reformers. So we would like to see similar trends in Angola, where reforms improving the business climate for SMEs is picking up. So this slide just shows the front runner across the comparator economies is Portugal, and the regional average for sub-Saharan Africa in terms of rank is 143, and Angola is at the 181. This is an interesting slide because it shows how Angola is performing on different indicators. The indicators where we marked some progress were the start in a business, and also Angola is performing really well on the protecting minority investors indicator. But all the other indicators, there is still further room for improvement. This is a granular table from the report, and this table is available through our website and through the report for you to see more detailed data on each of the indicators, because each of the indicators has different sub-variables, and rule makers can trace where the weak links lie on different indicators that are measured by doing business. In the area of starting a business, we noticed a remarkable progress over time. So this graph shows that there have been a lot of progress, positive improvement on starting a business, trading across borders, registering property, somewhat on getting electricity and dealing with construction permit indicators, while there was a downward shift on the enforcing contracts indicator, and no changes on protecting minority investors, getting credit and resolving insolvency indicators. On starting a business indicator, the big advancement was the establishment of the one-stop shop that is working fairly well and makes the life for entrepreneurs quite easier, because they can register business at one place, even though they still need to visit other agencies as subsequent steps, but that definitely was a big improvement. In the area of starting a business, there were further improvement that we acknowledged for Angola this year. First of all, the government issued new legislation that was approved on July 17, 2014, which significantly reduced the costs of opening a business, especially that can be seen on the graph on the top right corner. Also, the government of Angola improved registration procedures by decreasing the time it takes to obtain the commercial operations permit. So these were very laudable positive changes for the entrepreneurs on the ground. Another indicator where I would like to acknowledge positive improvement is the paying taxes indicator. The government of Angola also reduced the corporate income tax rate from 35% to 30% as of January 1st, 2015. So again, that was a positive reflection on our data and helped Angola to advance towards the best practice frontier. And the new rate is applicable to taxes paid on profits from the fiscal year of 2014. So these are basically a couple of highlights that I wanted to make, these two indicators. On the resolve and insolvency indicator, the reason why Angola is lagging behind is because the private sector and the way we collect data, we go to entrepreneurs, we go to lawyers, we go to accountants. We also sent a team to travel to Angola, that traveled to Luanda and collected data on the ground, where they met with different agencies as well as the private sector. And basically we were told that courts are not so much used by small to medium-sized businesses, and there are no court-supervised bankruptcy proceedings currently happening. So that's why legal indicators, when we collect data for the legal indicators, they really drag Angola's performance down because there is no confidence in the strong legal institutions in the country. So these are the main things I wanted to highlight, and I can answer further questions.
Yes, we can certainly bring up more issues, I think, in the question and answer period, but thank you for your presentation. I think it points to the number of improvements that have been made, while there are constraints that continue, but that we can see that there is a positive trend that is starting with regard to the best practices being applied. With that, we'll turn to Mr. Camilo, and he will talk.
There.
Okay.
Thank you. So good afternoon. All protocol observed. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Vitor Camilo from Tech Angola, and I would like, I will be the last one, so far as I understand, so I will collect 2 minutes from each other, so I will have 4 minutes more. Thank you very much. Okay. First, the current situation. I think that when I was preparing this presentation, I thought that we will talk to businessmen here in US. Because what we in Angola have is the lack of more businessmen arriving there and start to help the country in this diversification process that we need. So this presentation is pretty much for the ones that they want to go to Angola and try to sell them how they should go there, okay? First, and I must be fast enough, let me just say that Angola is quite a big country, and for the ones that don't know exactly, it's slightly bigger than South Africa, and have more arable land. And I will go to that point in a minute. So, a lot of resources. And talking about agriculture, let's just fix that in terms of soils. We have 143 million acres available of arable soils down there. At the moment, the economy in terms of Africa is the 5th biggest economy, and we would like to, of course, increase this figure. Not everything are good news. The oil price have eaten us a little bit, but we must see it as an opportunity. We are suffering a little bit down there. People are trying to look for alternatives, but as we stand up and look for alternatives, we are doing the correct approach. And some of the other persons that talked about some difficulties in the market at the moment. Banks are struggling a little bit. We do not have access to the US dollars or to foreign currency as we want. But nevertheless, now we are looking for the opportunities. Main constraints to bilateral businesses in our opinion. So the major barriers and common mistakes. So the first is misunderstanding the Angolan culture and social environments. Angola is completely different from US and for other countries. So we are different, and as different, we need to respect those differences, and that is one of the key points to do business with Angola. There's of course some administrative issues we must write down. There are some talks about transparencies and bureaucracy. There's a lot of improvement on this. On the last 5 years, we can really open a company now in Angola in a week time frame. And who do more than that is because they're not doing properly. There's insufficient knowledge about the proper business channels and key players. It's very important. And of course, unqualified opportunities and lack of partner assessment. Go there, you need to know people there, have assessment, try to get as much as information as you can. Of course, the main consequences and impacts are that companies postpone investments. So companies that we know that go there, not only American, but also European and from other countries, go there, they don't feel it as proper and then postpone the investment. That is, in this precisely moment, one of the biggest constraints. So competitive advantage and business opportunities. We have put this photo here because this is a transformation factory. We need to transform, we need to put added value on the products, we can bring it down there. As just for examples, I bring it here 3 main sectors. So agriculture, taking the best out of the natural resources. Energy, renewables are the key. And Angola, sometimes people said that God is Angolan because you have given to Angola a lot of potential. And this potential in terms of hydropower is really, and somebody have stressed that in previous section, that really is a key point. And industry, of course, the industrialization and import reduction. So energy. Energy is so key. That is one of the main perspectives for Americans. Go there and work in the energy sector. Here is just a map of Angola with the main electrical systems we have down there. It's very important because the government have really put a lot of effort in reverse the cycle of the lack of energy on the country. Just for your understanding, is now being built a dam, is Lauca Dam, with the capacity of 2 gigawatt in terms of full production. It means that it will coverage more or less 1/3 of the needs in terms of energy, actual energy in the country. And it's in the news that Kakulu Kabasa Dam will become also a project in the near future and will bring 2.4 more gigawatts on the system. So only 2 dams will cover more than 50% of our needs in terms of energy. And the potential of put more dams and put almost 90% of the energy coming from hydro, that is a renewable, is completely at our, it's possible to achieve very easily. It's important also that wind, I'm coming this week from South Africa. I've been in a fair in South Africa, in Cape Town, about wind. The South Africa at the moment is struggling with energy problems. They do not have water. The lack of water in this moment in South Africa increased the price of food last month 7%. So they are in the middle of quite a big problem. And without water for agriculture, they don't have also water for producing energy. And they are turning themselves for wind. They have wind. Wind is another renewable. And we also have the potential mainly on the south, on Namib province, a good spot for also invest on wind. Forest. Forest, as I'm going to show in the next slide, is roughly half of the country can be labeled as forest. And with that, we have 144 million acres with the potential of biomass and biofuel businesses down there. So here is the agriculture sector. So half of the country is arable and half of the country is forest, but only a small piece of the arable land is being used at the moment. So there's a big potential for companies that are used to farm in big scale to come to Angola. Cannot be partners that are used to work in very small scale because the country is big. So we need to have partners like Americans that, of course, are used to farm big piece of lands. So just one very important point is that fortunately Angola have the sea, the Atlantic Ocean. The opportunities for aquaculture, and I heard a question some minutes ago about the cold chain. Aquaculture, in our opinion, it will be a massive opportunity because there's a tremendous opportunity in terms of the sea, in terms of the perspective of our own population that eats more fish rather than meat. And there's the opportunity to feed all the countries inland like Zambia and Democratic Republic of Congo with these opportunities. So the thing is, agriculture, we know, we have heard about AGOA. AGOA is really an opportunity for Angola that must be studied, then taught for people to know what is AGOA. If people now here, AGOA have been created here in US, but if you go down there, most of the people don't know what is AGOA. So we need to teach people to learn and teach what is AGOA and how to use this opportunity here in US. And I must thank to Ambassador Lalime the opportunity to talk here about one thing that is the fancy food show. I don't know if you remember in a opportunity at your house, but we have understand that there's a tremendous opportunities for small, sometimes for big scale opportunities, but also for small opportunities. Let's see, for example, those examples. At my left, we have Angolan mushrooms. Those Angolan mushrooms could be tasted here in US. We aim to come with these mushrooms here. For the fancy food show, for example, that will be in New York and some of them, and I think that the embassy will help us to bring these live products into US because there's a lot of restrictions.
Yeah.
I can also present you Gingenga. Gingenga is quite a fruit, and we have put this in ice creams, and guess what? It's better than lemon or other types. So, and if we can addicted the Americans to Gingenga, we'll have a and at last, at my right, you have a passion fruit. Look at this size from Uige. It's a big passion fruit from my province, and it's so sweet that I think there's an opportunity also to try to sell it here. So these are, of course, small-scale opportunities, but there's the opportunity to bring it here. Of course, there's also another big issue, that is the cost of our products now for our population. For the same package of food and goods, we can compare that in Uganda, the same package will cost you $11, and in Luanda, in Angola, will cost you $31. The same thing, that is, so half a kilo of bread, 1 kilo of rice, so a package. So we need, this is mainly due to the importation. Mm-hmm. So we need to stop as much as we can the importation of goods and start the business. So the thing is for the Americans how to succeed there. So we prepared this, the way we approach it. So there's the prospection stage and there's the deployment stage. The prospection, so people need to gather information about Angola. And of course it's not easy because most of them it's not published in the web yet. That will become, but find the correct people to know it. So opportunities management, do that cycle. Expectations alignment. So as the person from Chevron said, must be always a win-win situation. So we need to go there, but it should be always a win-win situation. And then, of course, if everything goes well, we can have a business startup, establish an operation and ongoing. Of course, for us, this means a 3T approach: trade, transparency, and trust. Because, of course, without transparency and trust, the Americans don't go there. Is the last slide?
Okay.
So we just say that, and I will going to resume. It's better sometimes to gather all the information before go to Angola. Could be a trauma to go to Angola without preparation. So with the value of an airplane fare, maybe it's better to prepare it year before go there. Thank you very much.
Very good.
Thank you for that very illuminating
Excellent.
presentation. Yes, you did get your few extra minutes as well, but I think the information was very poignant and that the audience really appreciated it as well. So now let's get down to brass tacks and answer additional questions that they may have provoked you to think about, or additional information that you'd like to have from our panelists, two of whom are actual actors on the ground, and one who's looking at some of the improvements as well as some of the constraints for actually doing business in Angola today. So with that, I think you know the protocols that our dear Monday has established since the morning, and we will take rounds of 3, and I will begin with Eric Michel.
Hello, thank you for those presentations. I have a
Please stay
simple
where
question.
Eric Michel from?
From Cedar Street Capital.
Thank you.
And it's about arable land in Angola. We all know that unfortunately during the war there were a lot of landmines in Angola, and that was restricting the ability to farm in the country. Where does the demining program in the country stand, and what is the impact of the real availability of land in the country? Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have 2 other questions? In the back, please, sir.
Hi, my name is Paulo, and I'm with the U.S. Angola Chamber of Commerce. My question is for Mr. Victor Camilo. In your experience in working in Angola as a business owner, what has been your experience with finding young Angolans, with hiring, or in terms of human capital? And what do you think businesses could do to invite more Angolans that are living abroad, say in the U.S., to come and invest in Angola and work?
The gentleman in the front.
Yeah, Alex Vines from Chatham House. It's for Valentina. The index, what would be your main recommendation for the Angolan government to whiz up the league table quickly? Because I know a number of other African governments have put their attention to what is the easy win to get to move up the league table quite fast.
Thank you. Okay, that's our first round. I think the first 2 questions would be for Mr. Camilo and then Valentina.
Okay, thank you very much. So first, I don't know exactly how many landmines could be on the soil at the moment. What we know is that there's been a huge program to demine the country, a huge, very huge. And for example, I remember that 10 years ago, we can see in the paper often some casualties around the mines, but so far as I remember, for the last years, I've not be aware of that. So we see that the lands, the big problem or issue with the lands is that we need to make soil corrections before start farming. So the soil is not fully prepared for farming at the moment. There's a lot of correction to do, mainly on the central plateau. And of course, that is a huge investment for large scale. But lands are available, and mainly on the north, water is also available. There's a lot of availability on that. About the Angolan, so that is really one of the key issues. Find out skilly Angolans down there. I think that the most skilly young people are not in Angola. Unfortunately, most of them are coming to study abroad, and maybe a huge percentage have not returned to the country yet. So that's an effort that must be done, and we need, of course, most of them there. We in Tech Angola, in our group of companies, we have hired a lot of them, but then I must say that the banks sometimes rob us. also Sonangol rob us, and it's not easy because, of course, if you are skilly and you are in Angola at the moment, there's a lot of opportunities for young skilly people. So it's easy to start with a small average salary, and in 2-3 years have a nice salary. So people just move, and the ones who can pay more will in the end retain the best. So to have opportunities to call for people, young people or skilled people to come and make startups there, produce their own companies. I think there's now the time. The time is now, much more rather than in the past. It's now the time to come and to bring companies within, to bring knowledge, to bring also financial structures, and in the end, there will be a lot of space for everybody, in my opinion.
Jeannie, if I could just add a couple of points on the agriculture, because one of the companies in which our investment fund has invested is agriculture, is a farm company, and they're expanding into a new area, actually in Bengo province, and we have a demining operation going on actually in that particular hectareage that we're looking to use. But having just come from London last week, we were talking at a conference there. There's the Mines Advisory Group and the Halo Trust, both of which are very active in this activity, and both of which have very high reputation. As far as I know, quote.
There's a shortage in funding.
That's the issue, shortage of funding. Okay.
We're still in it. We contribute, I believe, about $5 million a year. But we're one of the few donors left in the program. And Angola at this point will not meet the standard or the goals that are set for to be completely free of mines within the next 20 years, unless more money is put towards the effort.
And let Alex chime in. Oh, I'm sorry, Minister.
Can I also comment that the issue of landmines is really a complex one. But I think that most of the landmines we were talking about were mainly along the highways, where the communications were made during the war. So along the Benguela railway line, for example, most of the infrastructure was filled with roads. So in these few years of peace, what has happened was that before rebuilding the roads, we had to have a program of demining all these old roads and old railway lines. So when we talk about mining, landmines in Angola, it's not that in every place or in every forest there were landmines. So I think that's the perception,
Yes.
but it's mainly on those highways. Generally, people do know areas where landmines were placed. So when they say 15 million landmines were placed in Angola, it's not true. It's not true, but quite a number of areas where, particularly where highways were, roads, and in some paths where the people used to go through. And most of these were taken out. I do believe that we need time to continue to fund this program. The government does also fund this program of demining, but indeed I think that it's not as it used to be. So that's why people think that's how the landmine situation is a problem in terms of economic development. I don't really see it that way. But as well as on the issue of young Angolans, I think that most young Angolans who go to study abroad, they are now coming. I'm looking at, for the last 11 years, for example, we've had about 300 young men went to China, 600 young men went to Russia, coming back, many in Portugal, even here in the United States, people go and come back. And indeed, there is a program for young people to start a small business and develop it in Angola also. But just as much as it is also a challenge for government to find jobs for some of these young people, it is a headache. But I think that that's why it's important that maybe opportunities can be done both by the private sector, young people themselves, but also by the government. And indeed, there is very open ground to employ young people.
Thank you, Excellency. Ted, did you also want to respond to?
I don't know, did Alex want to?
No, it's okay.
Oh,
It's okay.
okay.
I wanted to know if you also
Yeah,
wanted
the
to
only
pick
thing
up
I was
on
going to
the
say in terms
other
of finding
issue.
young Angolans, we're very small in terms of our fund, but we made a very conscious effort to try and identify people either in Europe or elsewhere within the university system, actually, to try and get trainees. But we're limited. I mean, this is very small, so we're talking very small numbers. But then, unfortunately, what happens is, we hire them, we train them, and then Mamadou takes them.
I hear a vicious cycle going on. Is that part of your index? Valentina, you have the last question, please.
Sure. Well, first of all, when we engage in dialogues and we work together with many governments around the world, many governments from the Africa region, we tend to advise not to only focus on the doing business indicators because they just tell part of the story, but think about the broader competitiveness agenda. What makes sense for the country? Broadly, what is the country like and how can regulations and institutions help boost entrepreneurship? There are two types of approaches that countries can choose. The low-hanging fruit would be to improve the efficiency of processes. For example, make it easier to start a business or make it easier to obtain a construction permit. But then if the issue lies with the inefficiency of legal institutions and the weaknesses of legal institutions, those reforms take a long time to implement. They require a lot of effort, a lot of financial resources, but in the end they also pay back. So when we reform bureaucratic processes, it's also important to focus on the institutions that stand behind those processes. The good practices that we advocate is improve coordination among different agencies through establishment of one-stop shops, through the use of modern IT technologies. But for example, if IT technologies are too expensive and it's not easy to implement, coordination through agencies can also be in physical form by creating physical one-stop shops to make it easier for entrepreneurs to set up their businesses, to pay taxes. And once these regulations are improved, once it's easier for people to set up their businesses, there'll be more incentives for them to move out of the shadow economy and work in the formal sector. That would also attract smart young people to set up their own businesses and to generate more revenue for the governments. The World Bank works, as I mentioned before, with different governments on the reform agenda. So we're happy to provide more information, how we collect the data, what we think, where we think lie the problems that need to be resolved. But the approach should be global. For example, I can specifically single out the Get Electricity indicator. To our understanding, in Angola, there is no data on SAIDI and SAIFI. These are the two indices that are very important to collect data on because they show you how many electricity interruptions there are once the connection is flowing and the duration of those indicators. If you don't have this information for the country, you don't know what to improve and how to improve if there's no data available for regulators to work off. So that would be my general recommendation.
Unfortunately, we are going to have to end our panel at this time, but I'd like to thank the panelists because they've really given us some good insights into doing business in Angola. And as you know, there will be a reception after, so I'm sure you can engage them with your other questions if you have them during that time. Thank you very much.
Victor.
Okay.
Very good.